The Filipina sensation had just watched her 7-match winning streak end in Toronto. She had been dismantled 6-0 in the final set by an Olympic gold medalist. Her ankle was still tender, her body exhausted, her heart heavy from defeat. But when Alex Eala stepped onto the court in Cincinnati, she did something that left the tennis world completely speechless. She didn't just beat Alycia Parks, she destroyed her. And the crowd erupted as Eala Mania returned with a vengeance. Just days after her Canadian Open run ended at the hands of Belinda Bencic, Alex Eala was back on the court. And the revenge tour that had defined her North American swing was far from over. Her run in Toronto had been nothing short of spectacular. After winning her first WTA Tour title in Washington, D.C., she arrived in Toronto and immediately made a statement. She dismantled Alycia Parks 6-1, 4-6, 6-2 in a revenge showdown, avenging her Australian Open heartbreak from January. She then outlasted Caddy McNally 6-3, 5-7, 6-4 in a grueling 2-hour and 39-minute battle. The streak had reached 7 matches, the longest of her career. But then came Belinda Bencic. The 2015 Canadian Open champion and Olympic gold medalist ended Eala's run with a clinical 6-4, 6-0 victory in just 73 minutes. The second set bagel was a harsh reminder that even the most incredible runs must eventually come to an end. Eala had been running on fumes. She had played 8 matches in roughly 12 days across 2 countries, winning 7 in hugely impressive fashion. The exhaustion was visible. Her movement was less sharp. Her shots were precise. And after the match, she admitted that she needed a break. "I definitely will take maybe 2 days off, a day or 2, she said, laughing that she needed a haircut and her nails were grown out. But 2 days was all she could afford. The WTA schedule waits for no one, and the Cincinnati Open, another WTA 1000 event, was just around the corner. The Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio was about to witness the return of Eala Mania. The 21-year-old Filipina, ranked No. 20 in the world, earned a first-round bye at the Cincinnati Open, giving her precious extra time to recover. She had made it clear that she was healthy and grateful, focused on applying the lessons of Washington and Toronto during the next stops in Cincinnati and New York. "I'm counting my blessings. I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more and in a better way in Cincinnati and New York." And now standing across the net from her was a familiar face. Alycia Parks, the American who had tormented Eala in Melbourne, the woman who had pushed her to 3 sets in Toronto, the opponent who had become a symbol of Eala's growth. The rematch was set. And this time, Eala wasn't just seeking revenge. She was seeking redemption. The Eala caravan had moved on to Cincinnati, and the crowd was ready to erupt. The Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio had seen its share of great champions. But when Alex Eala stepped onto the court for her Cincinnati Open debut, she was about to deliver something that even the most seasoned observers hadn't expected. The 21-year-old Filipina, ranked No. 20 in the world, had earned a first-round bye at the WTA 1000 event, giving her precious extra time to recover from the grueling Toronto campaign. She had made it clear that she was healthy and grateful, focused on applying the lessons of Washington and Toronto during the next stops in Cincinnati and New York. And now standing across the net from her was a familiar face, Alycia Parks, the American who had tormented Eala in Melbourne, the woman who had pushed her to 3 sets in Toronto, the opponent who had become a symbol of Eala's growth. The rematch was set. And this time, Eala wasn't just seeking revenge, she was seeking redemption. The first set was a statement. Eala came out firing, her movement crisp, her focus laser sharp. The exhaustion that had plagued her in Toronto was nowhere to be seen. The ankle that had been taped up just days earlier seemed to be holding perfectly. She broke Parks's serve early, dictating rallies with her left-handed patterns that had become the nightmare of every opponent on the tour. Game after game, Eala dismantled Parks's game. The American, who had once used her devastating serve to steal victory from Eala in Melbourne, couldn't find an answer. Eala's returns were sharp. Her court coverage was relentless. Her shot selection was impeccable. The first set ended in a way that no one could have predicted. 6-1, a demolition, against a player who had beaten her before. Against a player who had pushed her to 3 sets just days earlier. But the destruction wasn't over. Because in the second set, Eala didn't just continue her dominance. She elevated it to something almost unplayable. She broke Parks's serve again and again. The American's body language slumped. Her confidence evaporated. When the final point was won, the stadium erupted. The crowd, which had been waiting to see if Eala Mania could return, had gotten exactly what they came for. The Eala effect had officially arrived in Cincinnati, and the destruction was complete. The numbers told the story of utter dominance. Eala had just extended her winning streak against Parks to 2-0 in 2026. She had avenged her Australian Open heartbreak in Toronto, and now she had destroyed her in Ohio. The loss to Bencic was a distant memory. Eala Mania was back. The destruction was complete. Alex Eala had just dismantled Alycia Parks in a way that left the tennis world speechless. But it was what happened next that truly marked the return of something special. The Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio had been transformed. Just as SoBi Stadium in Toronto had been turned into Little Manila, the Cincinnati crowd had arrived in full force. Philippine flags hung from every section. The chants of "Let's go, Alex" echoed through the stadium like thunder. Families attended their first ever professional tennis match just to see her. The Eala effect had officially crossed state lines. When the final point was won, the eruption was deafening. Grown adults wept openly. Children waved flags with abandon. And Eala, the 21-year-old who had just bounced back from the most humbling loss of her career, dropped to her knees in celebration. She had done it. She had extended her dominance over Parks to 2-0 in 2026. She had avenged her Australian Open heartbreak and then some. She was showing the world that the loss to Bencic wasn't the end. It was just a bump in the road. The numbers told the story of utter dominance. Eala had won 76% of her first serve points and converted 5 of 9 break points. She had been clinical from the baseline, her left-handed patterns wreaking havoc on Parks's rhythm. The American who had once stolen victory from Eala in Melbourne was powerless. But the real story wasn't just about the tennis. It was about what Eala represented. A nation of over 110 million people, seeing one of their own on the biggest stage. A diaspora that had packed stadiums from Miami to Dubai to Washington to Toronto to Cincinnati, waving Philippine flags and chanting her name. A young woman who had become more than just a tennis player. She had become a movement. After the match, Eala was visibly moved by the support. The same fans who had packed SoBi Stadium had made the journey to Ohio. They had come to show the world that Eala Mania was not just a passing moment. It was a movement that was here to stay. The destruction of Alycia Parks in Cincinnati wasn't just another win for Alex Eala. It was a message, a declaration that the Filipina sensation had not been broken by the Belinda Bencic defeat. She had been forged by it. After the match, the numbers spoke for themselves. Eala had won 76% of her first serve points and converted 5 of 9 break points against Parks. The American who had once stolen victory from her in Melbourne was powerless. The player who had pushed her to 3 sets in Toronto was dismantled in straight sets. The message was unmistakable. The loss to Bencic was not the beginning of a slide. It was a detour on a journey that was far from over. The victory also marked something far more significant than just another win over Parks. With the triumph, Eala had firmly re-established her dominance in a rivalry that had become one of the most intriguing storylines on the WTA Tour. The Australian Open loss in January had been a wound that festered for 7 months. The Toronto victory in August had been the first salvo of revenge. The Cincinnati destruction was the confirmation that Eala had completely solved the Parks puzzle. Eala had now beaten Parks in back-to-back tournaments, and each victory had been more dominant than the last. She had shown the tennis world that she learns from her mistakes, adapts to her opponents, and grows stronger with every match. The Filipina sensation who had been dismantled 6-0 in the final set by Bencic just days earlier had completely flipped the script. She had taken the lessons from Toronto and implemented them in Ohio. She had shown the WTA that she was not just a flash in the pan, but a player who was here to stay. What happened after Toronto, the tennis world was asking. The answer was written on the scoreboard in Cincinnati. Alex Eala had made a statement, and the WTA was listening. The destruction of Alycia Parks in Cincinnati was more than just a victory. It was a declaration that Alex Eala's impact on the sport was no longer just about winning matches. It was about bringing an entire nation with her. The Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio had witnessed history before. But the sight of Philippine flags waving from every section, the sound of thousands of fans chanting "Let's go, Alex," in unison, the energy that transformed a routine WTA 1000 tournament into a celebration of Filipino pride. This was something new, something unprecedented. Danielle Collins, the former Australian Open finalist who had been working as a Tennis Channel analyst, had put it perfectly just days earlier. "I'm really loving Alexandra Eala. One of my closest friends is Filipino. Just seeing this wave of Filipinos in tennis and all of the fans that are coming out to these matches, this is a really special moment for tennis culture." She wasn't alone. Coco Gauff had praised Eala's impact, saying, "I think the demographic that Alex is bringing to the sport of tennis is so great, and I think all of us should embrace that, because we're all benefiting from it." The numbers spoke for themselves. In Toronto, Eala had sold out a 10,000-seat stadium in just 30 minutes, a feat only Serena Williams had achieved in the last 20 years. She had turned Sobeys Stadium into Little Manila, complete with chicken adobo at the food court, and thousands of Filipino fans transformed the atmosphere into something that felt like a home match. In Cincinnati, the same phenomenon was unfolding. Fans who had never watched tennis before were showing up in droves to see her. Eala herself, despite her exhaustion, had embraced the support. The atmosphere this whole week has been just incredible. It's been hard to describe to other people the feeling of being in that stadium, full of the fans and all the love, she said after the Bencic loss in Toronto, still addressing the Filipino community directly in Tagalog. Even her opponents had noticed. Belinda Bencic, who had just defeated Eala in Toronto, compared the experience to playing Serena Williams. "You know, I never really minded that," Bencic said of the crowd. "Because, you know, whenever I played Serena a couple years ago, and also in Fed Cups played against France and Brazil, I really like it. I embrace it. I definitely prefer this over a crowd that's not really interested or a little bit quiet." The Eala effect wasn't just about tennis, it was about representation. It was about a country of 110 million people finally seeing themselves on the global stage. And it was about a 21-year-old who had become more than just a player. She had become a symbol of hope and resilience. The Cincinnati victory over Parks had sealed it. The Filipina sensation, who had been dismantled 6-0 in her previous match by Bencic, had not only bounced back but had done so emphatically. And the crowd had erupted as Eala Mania returned with a vengeance. The road ahead was demanding. The Cincinnati Open would continue, and then the US Open awaited at the end of the North American swing. But Alex Eala had already proven something that no ranking or trophy could measure. She had shown the world that tennis could be more than just a sport. It could be a movement. And the movement was only just beginning.